He sold his wife and twin daughters to and divorced wealthy CEO. She never knew he was already hooked, but Shanice Williams stared at the stack of bills covering her kitchen table like fallen leaves after a storm. Each red notice screamed the same message: pay or lose everything. The apartment walls seemed to close in as another eviction notice joined the collection. Each red stamp a countdown to homelessness that ticked louder than the broken clock above the stove. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was a lie crafted by the person who claimed to love you most? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The billionaire's penthouse elevator doors opened to reveal a woman holding divorce papers and a pregnancy test, but she wasn't his wife. Shanice Williams stood frozen as Maxwell Cross stared at the evidence that would destroy everything they'd built together over the past 6 months. What he didn't know was that her husband had already collected the final payment for delivering exactly what the contract specified: a pregnant woman carrying the heir Maxwell desperately needed. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was a lie crafted by the person who claimed to love you most? Have you ever trusted someone with your children's safety only to realize they sold you all for money? Do you know what it feels like when the ground disappears beneath your feet? This is the story of a mother who thought she was saving her family, but was actually being traded like property between two men who saw her as nothing more than a commodity. But what happens when the woman they underestimated decides to rewrite the rules entirely? Stay with me as we dive into a story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, betrayal, and the lengths people go to for power. It all started 3 months earlier, when Shanice thought her biggest problem was overdue rent. She signed a paper that would change everything while her twin daughters slept in the next room, trusting the man who had already decided to sell them all. Shanice Williams stared at the stack of bills covering her kitchen table like fallen leaves after a storm. Each red notice screamed the same message: pay or lose everything. The apartment walls seemed to close in as another eviction notice joined the collection. Each red stamp a countdown to homelessness that ticked louder than the broken clock above the stove. "Baby, I got us a way out." Corey's voice cut through her panic like a knife through butter. Her husband of 5 years stood in the doorway, his smile too wide, his eyes too bright. Something was different about him tonight, something that made her stomach twist. "What kind of way out?" Shanice asked, pushing the bills aside. "Rich guy in Atlanta needs a live-in caretaker. Good money. Real good money." Corey pulled out a folded paper from his jacket pocket. Enough to cover all this mess and more. Shanice grabbed the document. The letterhead read Cross Industries in gold letters that seemed to shimmer under their cheap kitchen light. The salary figure made her blink twice. "This can't be real." "It's real, baby. Met him through my cousin Marcus. Guy's got more money than God and needs someone to watch his place while he travels." Corey moved behind her chair, his hands sliding down her shoulders. "You and the girls. Just for a few months." "Why me? Why us?" His fingers found the knots in her neck, working them loose with practiced skill. "Because you're perfect, beautiful, great with kids, and you don't ask too many questions." That last part should have been a warning. But when you're drowning, you don't question the lifeline. "The girls have school, private tutoring, all covered." His lips brushed her ear. "Swimming pool, big backyard. Maya and Mia will love it." Shanice closed her eyes as his hands moved lower, remembering why she'd fallen for Corey in the first place. He knew exactly how to touch her, how to make her forget everything else. His fingers traced patterns on her skin that made rational thought impossible. "What about you?" she whispered. "Business to handle here in Miami, but I'll visit." He turned her chair around, his dark eyes holding hers. "This is our shot, Shanice. Our chance to finally get ahead." The contract felt heavy in her hands. Too many pages. Too many words she didn't understand. But the number at the bottom was clear enough. 3 months. Maybe less. Corey knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Baby, when have I ever steered you wrong?" She could think of several times, but his thumb was stroking her wedding ring, and Maya was coughing in the next room again. The kind of cough that needed a doctor they couldn't afford. What would you sacrifice for someone you love? How far would you go before crossing your own boundaries? Tell me in the comments below. Shanice picked up the pen. Her signature looked small and fragile next to all those legal words. But it was done. Pack light, Corey said, folding the contract. We leave tomorrow. That night, as Corey's hands roamed her body with unusual urgency, Shanice tried to ignore the voice in her head that whispered this felt less like love and more like goodbye. His touch was different, hungrier, more desperate, like he was memorizing her. I love you, he whispered against her neck. I love you too. But as sleep finally claimed her, one thought kept her restless. In all those contract pages, she'd never seen the word temporary once. As their car pulled away from Atlanta's gleaming skyline toward Maxwell Cross's estate, Shanice felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The gates that opened for them looked less like an entrance and more like a trap closing behind them. The mansion's front door opened to reveal not a housekeeper or butler, but the man himself, and Shanice's world tilted on its axis. Maxwell Cross stood in the doorway like he owned not just the mansion, but the very air around it. 6 feet of controlled power in a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than Shanice's annual salary. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds right before lightning strikes. Mrs. Williams. His voice was smooth as expensive whiskey. Welcome. Behind her, Maya and Mia pressed against her legs, suddenly shy. The mansion rose above them like something from fairy tale, all white columns and gleaming windows that reflected the Georgia sun like mirrors. Mr. Cross. Shanice's voice came out smaller than she intended. Maxwell's gaze moved over her slowly, taking in her thrift store dress and worn shoes. But there was something in his expression that made her skin warm despite the morning chill. Not judgment, something else, something that made her pulse quicken. And these must be the twins. He knelt down to the girl's level, his expensive suit touching the ground without concern. Maya, always the braver one, stepped forward. Are you really rich? She asked. Maxwell's laugh was unexpected, deep and genuine. I suppose I am. Are you really 8 years old? 8 3/4, Mia corrected, finally finding her voice. Oh, my mistake. That 3/4 makes all the difference. Corey cleared his throat behind them. Well, I should get going. Business calls. Shanice turned, surprised. Already. Told you, baby. Things to handle in Miami. He kissed her cheek quickly, his lips barely touching her skin. You're in good hands. Something cold settled in Shanice's stomach as she watched her husband shake Maxwell's hand. There was familiarity there, like they'd met before. Take care of my girls, Corey said, but he was looking at Maxwell, not her. I intend to, Maxwell replied, and the way he said it made Shanice's breath catch. Corey's goodbye was rushed, distracted. He hugged the girls, but kept checking his watch. When he kissed Shanice, it felt like an afterthought. Call me tonight, she said. Sure thing, baby. But as his rental car disappeared down the long driveway, Shanice realized he hadn't looked back once. Shall we go inside? Maxwell's hand touched the small of her back, guiding her toward the door. The contact sent electricity through her entire body. The mansion's interior took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with angels and clouds. Marble floors stretched in every direction, and a staircase curved upward like something from a movie. Holy cow, Maya whispered. Language, Shanice said automatically, but she was thinking the same thing. Maxwell led them through rooms that seemed to go on forever. A library with books from floor to ceiling. A dining room with a table that could seat 20. A kitchen bigger than her entire apartment back home. Mrs. Chun will show you to your rooms, Maxwell said as an older Asian woman appeared like magic. Dinner is at 6. We dress appropriately. The way he said appropriately while looking at her discount store clothes made Shanice's cheeks burn. I should mention, Maxwell continued, cell service can be spotty on the property. Something about the hills. But the landline works perfectly if you need to reach anyone. Mrs. Chun led them upstairs to a wing of bedrooms that felt like a luxury hotel. The girls' room had twin beds with princess canopies and toys they'd only dreamed of. Shanice's room connected to theirs through a bathroom that sparkled like it had never been used. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like they could see straight through you? Someone whose presence filled a room before they even spoke? Drop a comment if you felt that magnetic pull towards someone you knew was dangerous. That evening, when Shanice tried to call Corey from the landline, she got his voicemail. She tried to sell and got the same automated message that chilled her blood. The number you have dialed is not in service. She stood in a marble foyer, holding the phone with shaking hands, as Maxwell appeared at the top of the stairs. His smile never reached his eyes. "Welcome to your new home," he said, and Shanice realized with growing horror that he wasn't talking about a temporary stay. The contract Corey signed had clauses Shanice never saw, including one that made her realize she wasn't an employee, she was inventory. The study felt like a courtroom where Maxwell sat as judge and jury, his mahogany desk a barrier between her growing panic and his unsettling calm. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held leather-bound volumes that probably cost more than her car. "There seems to be some confusion about your arrangement," Maxwell said, sliding a thick folder across the polished wood. Shanice opened it with trembling fingers. Page after page of legal language that might as well have been written in another language. But certain phrases jumped out like neon signs: exclusive availability, no outside contact without approval, breach of contract penalties. "I don't understand." Your husband was very thorough in his negotiations. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, fingers crossed. "You and the children are to remain on the property for the duration of the agreement. No visitors, no unsupervised phone calls, no leaving without my express permission." The room spun around her. "That's not what he told me." "I'm sure it wasn't." Maxwell's voice held no sympathy. "Men like Corey specialize in selective truth-telling." "Men like Corey?" "Men who sell their families to pay gambling debts." The words hit her like physical blows. Gambling debts. Sell their families. The overdue bills at home suddenly made horrible sense. "The children will be tutored here. Mrs. Chun has prepared educational materials." Maxwell stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "You'll manage the household. Ensure everything runs smoothly. Be available when I need you." "Available for what?" He stopped in front of her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dangerous. "Whatever I require." The way he said it made her skin flush with equal parts fear and something else she didn't want to name. "This is kidnapping. This is a legal contract, signed by your husband and witnessed by my attorney." Maxwell's hand touched her shoulder, and despite everything, her body betrayed her with a shiver of awareness. "You're free to leave anytime, Mrs. Williams. But the financial penalties for breach of contract would bankrupt you for life." He moved behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders with practiced ease. "However, I prefer willing participants to reluctant prisoners." His thumbs found the knots of tension in her neck, working them with skillful precision. Against every rational thought, her body began to relax under his touch. "The children seem happy," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Maya's already claimed the library. Mia found the art supplies. They're safer here than they've ever been. What do you want from us?" His hands stilled. "I want a family, Mrs. Williams. A beautiful woman. Happy children. A home filled with laughter instead of silence." "You can't buy a family." "Can I?" His fingers resumed their massage, working down to the base of her neck. "Your husband seemed to think otherwise." The touch was hypnotic, making it hard to think clearly. Part of her wanted to melt into his hands, to forget the legal papers and the locked gates and the phone calls that wouldn't go through. What's the difference between charity and respect? Between pity and compassion? Share your thoughts below. That night, Shanice tried calling Corey again. The automated message was different this time. "This number has been disconnected." She stood in her luxurious prison, looking out at grounds that stretched beyond the horizon, and realized the horrible truth. She wasn't just isolated, she was abandoned. Across the hall, Maya and Mia slept peacefully in beds worth more than everything they'd owned back home. They'd eaten dinner at a table that belonged in a palace, played with toys that most children only saw in store windows. But as Shanice finally closed her eyes, one thought kept her awake. Maxwell Cross didn't just want a family. He wanted to own one. And somehow, Corey had given him exactly what he wanted. She caught him watching her through the security cameras, but when their eyes met through the lens, something shifted. Hunger replaced surveillance. The garden stretched endlessly under George's humid sky, but within its manicured perfection, Shanice felt like a bird in a gilded cage, beautiful, but still captive. She discovered the cameras on day 3, tiny black eyes hidden among the roses and tucked behind the garden statues. At first, it felt like violation. Then she realized something else. Maxwell wasn't just watching her. He was studying her. "Mama, look." Maya's voice carried across the lawn where she and Mia were chasing butterflies near the fountain. Their laughter sounded different here, lighter, freer, like they'd forgotten about their cramped apartment and overdue bills. "I see you, baby." But Shanice's attention was on the camera mounted in the old oak tree. She stared directly into the lens, challenging the man behind it. Inside the house, Maxwell sat in his security room, surrounded by monitors that showed every corner of his property. But he only watched one screen now. Shanice Williams stood in his garden like she belonged there, her chin raised in defiance that made his pulse quicken. She was nothing like Elena. Where his deceased wife had been pale and fragile, Shanice was golden brown and strong. Elena had bent to his will like grass in the wind. Shanice stood against him like a tree with deep roots. He'd told himself this was about replacing what he'd lost. But watching her now, he realized it was about finding something he'd never had. A knock on his office door broke his concentration. Mrs. Chun entered with her usual silent efficiency. "The children are asking for story time," she said. "Mrs. Williams mentioned you have children's books." Maxwell's throat tightened. "In the nursery? 3rd floor. Should I tell them you'll read to them?" The nursery had been locked for 10 years. Since the accident. Since the night his real family died because of his mistakes. "No," he said quickly. I'll go myself." The nursery felt like stepping into a tomb. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, streaming through windows that had been sealed for a decade. 2 small beds sat against the wall, still made with sheets covered in cartoon characters. Toys lay scattered on the floor, exactly where he'd left them that terrible night. But when Maya and Mia burst through the door, chattering and laughing, the room came alive again. "Wow," Mia whispered, her eyes wide. "Were these your kids' toys?" Maxwell's chest tightened. "Yes." "Where are they now?" Maya asked with 8-year-old bluntness. "They're gone." Shanice appeared in the doorway, ready to scold her daughters for being nosy. But when she saw Maxwell's face, raw with grief he couldn't hide, her anger melted into something else. "Girls, why don't you pick out some books? I'll be right back." She followed Maxwell into the hallway, where he stood with his back against the wall, breathing like he'd run a marathon. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "I had a daughter once. She would have been your age." The words came out broken. Her name was Lily. She loved bedtime stories. Before she could stop herself, Shanice's hand touched his arm. The contact sent electricity through both of them. "What happened to her?" "Accident. 10 years ago. My fault." His eyes met hers, and she saw something that shocked her. Not the cold calculation she'd expected, but pain so deep it had no bottom. Have you ever found yourself attracted to someone you should hate? When someone shows you their vulnerable side, does it change everything? Let me know in the comments if you've experienced this emotional confusion. That night, Maxwell read "Goodnight Moon" to the twins in their bedroom. His voice was rusty from disuse, but the girls hung on every word. When Mia fell asleep mid-story, he tucked the blanket around her with hands that shook. As he passed Shanice in the hallway, their bodies brushed. For one electric moment, they were close enough to kiss. Close enough for her to see that his eyes weren't cold at all. They were burning. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For letting them bring life back to that room." As Maxwell comforted Maya back to sleep with surprising gentleness, he whispered something that made Shanice's heart stop. "I had a daughter once. She would have been your age." In that moment, Shanice realized Maxwell wasn't just collecting a family. He was trying to replace one. The woman in the photograph looked exactly like Shanice, and she'd been dead for 10 years. It happened by accident. Maya had been chasing Mia through the mansion's endless hallways when she knocked over a crystal frame in Maxwell's study. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor, revealing not one photo, but dozens hidden behind the first image. Shanice knelt to collect the pieces, her hands trembling as she saw face after face. A woman with her exact smile, her same dark eyes, her identical cheekbones. The woman wore a wedding dress in one photo, held a baby girl in another, laughed at a birthday party in the third. The dates on the backs made her stomach drop. 10 years ago, 11, 12. Don't touch those. Maxwell's voice cut through the silence like broken glass. Shanice spun around. He stood in the doorway, his face drained of all color. For the first time since she'd met him, Maxwell Cross looked afraid. Who is she? Shanice's voice barely came out as a whisper. Maxwell stepped into the room, his movements careful and controlled. Her name was Isabella. My wife. She died. Quel accident. She was. He stopped, his jaw clenching. She was pregnant. The photos scattered at Shanice's feet told a different story. Isabella's smile in every image. The baby she held growing older through the snapshots. This wasn't the face of someone who died 12 years ago. Maxwell. Shanice stood slowly, pieces of glass falling from her hands. This baby in the photos. How old was she when her wife died? His silence stretched too long. Maxwell, answer me. 3. The word came out strangled. Elena was 3 when Isabella died. Have you ever found yourself attracted to someone you should hate? When someone shows you their vulnerable side, does it change everything? Let me know in the comments if you've experienced this emotional confusion. Shanice backed toward the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Elena? You said your daughter's name was Elena? Yes, but Isabella was your wife's name. Maxwell's hands started shaking. Isabella named our daughter Elena before the accident. Something cold crawled up Shanice's spine. The master bedroom she glimpsed once felt like a shrine to the dead, untouched for a decade, where dust covered surfaces that hadn't been disturbed in years. But these photos were clean, recently handled, recently arranged. Where's Elena now? She asked. Maxwell's eyes went dark. She's safe. She's been safe for 10 years. Where, Maxwell? Somewhere Isabella can never hurt her again. The words hit Shanice like ice water. Isabella hadn't died in any car accident. And if these photos were any indication, she'd been very much alive just a few years ago. Show me her room, Shanice said quietly. What? Elena's room. Show me where your daughter sleeps. Maxwell's face crumbled. She can't. She's not here, is she? Shanice stepped closer, her fear replaced by something fiercer. Maxwell, where's your daughter? His confession came out in broken pieces. Isabella hadn't died. She'd tried to leave him, tried to take Elena. He'd fought for custody, used his money and lawyers to prove Isabella was unfit. Drugs, he claimed. Mental illness. Affairs. All lies. But the judge believed him. Isabella lost custody completely. Maxwell got everything. The house, the money, their daughter. She tried to take Elena anyway. Maxwell whispered. Broke into the house one night. I called the police. Had her arrested for attempted kidnapping. Of her own child? The court said Elena was mine. Only mine. Shanice felt sick. Where is Isabella now? Prison. She violated the restraining order 6 times, trying to see Elena. Last I heard, she was in a facility upstate. And Elena? Maxwell's voice dropped to nothing. Boarding school. In Switzerland. She doesn't know about any of this. I told her Isabella died when she was little. I thought it would be easier. As Shanice backed away from Maxwell's desperate explanation, her phone buzzed with the first message she'd received in weeks. But it wasn't from Corey. It was from a woman claiming to be Maxwell's ex-wife, and she was very much alive. The text was simple. I know you're there. I know what he's doing. Meet me at the Starbucks on Peachtree Street tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. Isabella. Maxwell hadn't seen the message yet. Shanice slipped her phone into her pocket, her mind racing. How had Isabella gotten her number? How did she know Shanice was here? And most importantly, what else had Maxwell lied about? The woman on the phone knew things about Maxwell that could destroy him, and she was willing to trade that information for Shanice's help. Isabella looked nothing like the woman in Maxwell's photos. Prison had aged her, carved lines around her eyes and mouth that spoke of years fighting a system designed to break her. But when she smiled at Shanice across the coffee shop table, her resemblance to the twins was unmistakable. "He chose you because you look like me," Isabella said without introduction. Same height, same build, same desperate situation. Shanice's coffee grew cold in her hands. "How do you know about my situation?" "Honey, I've been watching Maxwell for 10 years. You think you're the first woman he's brought to that house." The words hit like physical blows. "What do you mean?" Isabella pulled out a worn folder. Inside were photos, documents, newspaper clippings. Women's faces stared back at Shanice, all with similar features, all with children, all looking desperate. Sarah Martinez brought her and her son to the estate 3 years ago, told her it was temporary work. She lasted 4 months before she tried to run. What happened to her? Car accident on Highway 85. Very tragic, very convenient. Shanice's hand shook. "You're lying." "Am I?" Isabella slid another photo across the table. Jennifer Collins. 2 years ago. Her daughter was the same age as Elena when I lost custody. Jennifer lasted 6 months. Overdose, they said. Funny thing about Jennifer, she'd been clean for 3 years before she met Maxwell. The coffee shop around them buzzed with normal life. People laughed, typed on laptops, complained about traffic. None of them knew Shanice was staring at what might be her own future. "What does he want?" Shanice whispered. "He wants to play house. He wants a woman who looks like me, children who need him, a perfect little family that can't leave because they have nowhere else to go. But I could leave. Anytime." Isabella's laugh was bitter. "Could you? With what money? With what resources? And what about Maya and Mia? You think he hasn't gotten attached to them? You think he'll just let you walk away with his new daughters?" The truth hit Shanice like cold water. The blocked cell service, the isolated estate, the way Maxwell watched the twins with that hungry possessiveness. The contract Corey had signed that she'd never fully read. "There's something else," Isabella continued. "Elena doesn't know the truth about me, but she knows about you." "What?" "Maxwell sends her photos, letters, tells her about his new family. She thinks I'm dead and you're a new mother." Shanice's stomach turned. "That's sick. It gets worse. Elena's 18 now, legal adult. She's been asking to come home from boarding school. Maxwell's been putting her off, but she's threatening to come anyway." "Why are you telling me this?" Isabella leaned forward. "Because I need your help. Maxwell's been having Elena followed, her communications monitored. But if she came home and found you there, a woman with children who looks just like her dead mother, she might start asking questions." The pieces clicked together in Shanice's mind. "You want me to tell her the truth? I want you to help me get my daughter back. And in return, I'll help you and your girls get out of there alive." When was the last time someone's simple touch left you breathless? Share your story in the comments. That night, Shanice returned to the estate with Isabella's words echoing in her head. Maxwell was waiting in the wine cellar, their usual meeting place when he wanted privacy from the security cameras upstairs. The room felt like a confession booth carved from stone, where expensive bottles collected dust and secrets hung heavy in the air. "You were gone longer than usual today," Maxwell said, pouring wine neither of them would drink. "Just exploring Atlanta, getting familiar with the area." He studied her face in the dim light. "Find anything interesting?" Shanice's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Beautiful city, rich history." Maxwell moved closer, his presence filling the small space. "You know what I love about you, Shanice?" "What?" "You're honest, transparent. After everything I've been through, it's refreshing to be with someone who has nothing to hide." His words were like knives, each one a reminder of the lies built into their foundation. But when he reached for her, Shanice didn't pull away. She needed information. She needed his trust. His kiss tasted like desperation and wine, his hands gentle but possessive as they mapped her face, her neck, her shoulders. For a moment, Shanice let herself respond, let herself forget about Isabella's warnings and the photos of missing women. Just as Maxwell's lips found hers and Shanice felt herself surrendering to weeks of built-up tension, Maya's scream shattered the moment. Racing upstairs, they found Mia unconscious on the bathroom floor, and the pregnancy test Shanice had hidden was missing. Maxwell held the positive test in his shaking hands, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. When, he whispered, "I don't know, maybe 6 weeks." His smile was terrible in its intensity. This changes everything. She wasn't supposed to get pregnant. That wasn't part of Corey's deal, but the test in Maxwell's hand proved that some contracts write themselves. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Mia lay unconscious on the narrow bed, monitors beeping steadily while doctors ran test after test. She'd collapsed from dehydration and stress, they said. Nothing life-threatening, but concerning for a child her age. Maxwell paced the hallway like a trapped animal, his usual control shattered completely. Every few minutes, he'd stop at the window, stare at Mia's small form, then resume his frantic movement. "This is my fault," he muttered for the 10th time. The stress of the move, the new environment, being away from everything familiar. Shanice watched him from her chair, the pregnancy test results heavy in her pocket. She hadn't told him yet about the baby growing inside her. Hadn't found the right moment, the right words. But Maxwell had found the test himself when the paramedics arrived. Now he knew, and his reaction terrified her more than his anger ever could. Joy. Pure, possessive joy. "Mr. Cross." A doctor appeared in the doorway. "Your daughter is awake." Maxwell moved toward Mia's room, but Shanice caught his arm. "She's not your daughter." He turned to look at her, his eyes fever-bright. "Isn't she?" The question hung in the air like a threat. Inside the room, Mia reached for Shanice with weak arms. "Mama, I had a bad dream. Where's Daddy Corey?" The words hit Maxwell like physical blows. Shanice saw his face close off, saw the mask slide back into place. "Daddy Corey is away on business, baby. Remember? He'll be back soon." But even as she said the words, Shanice realized she hadn't heard from Corey in over a week. No calls, no texts, no updates about when this temporary arrangement would end. Maya curled up next to her sister on the hospital bed. "I don't want Daddy Corey to come back. I like it better with Mr. Maxwell." Shanice's blood turned cold. "Maya, don't say that. But it's true. He reads us stories and teaches us French, and he doesn't yell like Daddy does." Maxwell's smile was sharp as broken glass. Smart girls. They know quality when they see it. Have you ever run from something good because it scared you how much you wanted it? Drop a red heart if you've been there. That night, back at the estate, Maxwell cornered Shanice in the master bedroom. She'd been avoiding him since the hospital, but there was nowhere left to run. "We need to talk about the baby," he said, closing the door behind him. "There's nothing to talk about. It's not yours, isn't it?" He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. "When was the last time Corey touched you, Shanice? Really touched you?" The question made her stomach turn. "That's none of your business. It is when you're carrying my child. It's Corey's baby." Maxwell's laugh was soft and terrible. "Corey hasn't been in your bed for months. I've seen the surveillance footage, remember? I know exactly when he stopped being a husband and started being a pimp." The words hit like slaps. "Don't. The timeline doesn't lie, Shanice. This baby was conceived here, in this house, with me." She wanted to deny it, but the math was undeniable. The pregnancy test showed 6 weeks. Corey had barely touched her in the months before they came to Atlanta, too busy with his mysterious business meetings and late-night phone calls. But Maxwell had been different. Patient at first, then gradually more persistent. Those wine-soaked evenings in the cellar. The night she'd broken down, crying about the bills, and he'd held her until the tears stopped. The morning she'd woken up in his bed with no memory of how she'd gotten there. "Even if that's true," she whispered, "it doesn't change anything." Maxwell stepped closer, his hand reaching toward her stomach. "It changes everything. You're not going anywhere now. Neither are the girls. We're not your family, Maxwell. Aren't you? His fingers brushed her belly, and she felt the baby flutter in response. You live in my house, eat at my table, sleep in my bed. The girls call you mama and look at me like I hung the moon. What more do we need? Legal documentation, for starters. Marriage certificates. Adoption papers. Details. He pulled her closer, his breath warm against her ear. I can arrange all of that. Tomorrow, if you want. The hospital waiting room fluorescents buzzed overhead like angry wasps while Maxwell paced like a predator, his usual control shattered by the possibility of losing what he'd grown to treasure. On the fourth day, she found an envelope under her door. Not money this time, but a handwritten letter. The last line made her sink to the floor. I'm not asking for anything. I just need to know if you regret it. Her answer would change everything. But before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Corey, and his voice carried news that would shatter every lie Maxwell had built around them. Some conversations change your life not because of what's said, but because for the first time, you stop hiding from the truth. Corey's voice through the phone sounded different. Desperate. Scared. Shanice, baby, listen to me carefully. Don't let Maxwell know I'm calling. She stepped out onto the estate's back patio, her heart hammering. Where have you been? It's been 2 weeks since. I've been in jail. The words stopped her cold. What? Fraud charges. Embezzlement. They've got evidence I stole money from clients, forged documents. Shanice, I never did any of that stuff. Then how? Maxwell set me up. Corey's voice cracked. The whole thing was a setup from the beginning. The job opportunity, the contract, everything. He wanted you and the girls, and he needed me out of the way. Shanice sank onto a stone bench, her legs suddenly weak. That's impossible. Is it? Think about it, baby. How did I even hear about this job? Some guy calls me out of the blue, offers more money than I make in 5 years, and all I have to do is bring my family to Atlanta for a few weeks. The memory came flooding back. Corey getting that first phone call while she was making dinner. His excitement about the amazing opportunity that had fallen into his lap. How quickly everything had moved after that. The contract I signed, Corey continued, wasn't what they told me it was. I thought I was agreeing to temporary domestic work. Turns out I signed custody papers. What are you talking about? Legal guardianship, Shanice. I signed away temporary custody of you and the girls to Maxwell Cross. It's all legal, all binding, and I can't do anything about it from in here. The FBI agent's first question wasn't about kidnapping or trafficking. It was about whether Shanice wanted to go home, and for the first time in months, she didn't know the answer. When was the last time you were completely honest with someone about your fears? About what you really wanted? Share your experience below. Shanice hung up the phone with shaking hands. Legal guardianship. The words echoed in her head like a death sentence. She found Maxwell in his study, reading to Maya and Mia from a leather-bound book of fairy tales. The scene looked so perfect, so natural. The girls curled against his sides, his deep voice bringing princesses and castles to life. Girls, why don't you go start your baths? Shanice said, her voice surprisingly steady. I need to talk to Mr. Maxwell. They protested, but eventually wandered upstairs, leaving Shanice alone with a man who might have just destroyed her entire life. Corey called, she said without preamble. Maxwell didn't even look up from his book. Did he? He says you framed him. Had him arrested on fake charges. Corey says a lot of things. Maxwell closed the book, his movements calm and controlled. Most of them are lies. He says the contract he signed gave you legal guardianship of me and the girls. Now Maxwell looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. Would that bother you? Would it bother me? Shanice's voice rose. You're talking about kidnapping. I'm talking about protection. Maxwell stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace she'd grown to recognize. Corey was selling you, Shanice. All of you. He took money from me to deliver his wife and children like packages. You're lying. Am I? Maxwell pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages, then handed it to her. Read the texts. The messages made her sick. Corey discussing her and the girls like merchandise, asking about delivery dates and payment schedules. promising Maxwell that Shanice was clean and obedient and that the girls were well-behaved. This can't be real. It gets worse. Maxwell showed her bank records. He's been taking payments from me for 6 months, long before he ever told you about the job. The evidence was overwhelming. Corey hadn't just brought them to Maxwell. He'd sold them, planned it for months, used her desperation about money to manipulate her into agreeing. So what does that make you? Shanice whispered, "My savior or my owner?" Maxwell stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "What do you want me to be?" The question hung between them, loaded with months of tension, manipulation, and something that might have been genuine feeling. Before she could answer, the study door burst open. Maya and Mia ran in, faces flushed with excitement. "Mama, there are police cars outside." Through the window, Shanice saw the flashing lights, the men in bulletproof vests surrounding the house. Maxwell's face went white. "Stay behind me," he ordered, but Shanice was already moving toward the door. Whatever was happening outside, whatever came next, she wasn't going to hide behind anyone anymore. As Agent Morrison slid the photos across the table, images of 3 other women who'd entered Maxwell's world and never left, Shanice's blood turned to ice. Because in the last photo, she recognized something that changed everything. Corey shaking hand with Maxwell outside a Miami hotel, dated 2 years before they'd ever met. Her entire life had been a setup, from the day she met Corey to the moment she signed that contract, and Maxwell wasn't the mastermind she thought he was. The federal building felt like a concrete maze designed to swallow hope, where Shanice sat under harsh lighting that made everything look like a crime scene. Agent Morrison spread photographs across the metal table like he was dealing cards in a deadly game. Each image told a story that made Shanice's world tilt further off its axis. Sarah Martinez, age 28, mother of 1, disappeared from Maxwell Cross's estate 18 months ago. Jennifer Collins, age 31, mother of 2, last seen at the same location 6 months later. Angela Porter, age 29, twin daughters, vanished 4 months ago. The women's faces blurred together in Shanice's vision. They all looked like her. Same age range, same desperate circumstances, same beautiful children that would make perfect additions to a lonely billionaire's fantasy family. Where are they now? Shanice's voice came out as a whisper. Dead. All of them. Car accidents, overdoses, random violence. Amazing how dangerous life becomes once you leave Maxwell Cross's protection. But it was the final photograph that destroyed everything Shanice thought she knew. Corey shaking hand with Maxwell outside a Miami hotel. The timestamp showed a date 2 years before Shanice had ever met her husband. 2 years before their first date, their whirlwind romance, their hasty marriage. "Your husband has been working for Maxwell Cross for 3 years, Agent Morrison said. Professional recruiter. His job was to find the perfect woman, desperate, beautiful, with children that needed a father figure." The room spun around Shanice. "That's impossible. He courted you specifically. The random meeting at the coffee shop where he accidentally spilled his drink on you? Planned. The way he seemed to understand your financial struggles? He'd been researching you for months. Every memory of her relationship with Corey took on a sick new meaning. The way he'd appeared in her life, exactly when she needed someone most. How he'd known just what to say, just how to help, just when to propose. The pregnancy, she gasped. He wanted me to get pregnant. Pregnant women are less likely to run, more emotionally dependent. Maxwell's previous attempts with single mothers failed because the women eventually tried to leave. But a pregnant woman with children? She'll stay to protect her unborn child. What would you do if you found out someone you trusted had been manipulating your entire relationship? How do you rebuild after that kind of betrayal? Share your story below. The evidence room felt like a museum of broken lives, where file boxes contained the dreams and destruction of women who trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. "Where's Maxwell now?" Shanice asked. "Released on bail 2 hours ago. His lawyers are very good. And my daughters? Safe. Child Services has them in protective custody until we sort this out." Shanice's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I told you so. Meet me at the same place. 1 hour. Isabella. Agent Morrison noticed her reading the message. Ms. Williams, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did Maxwell Cross ever hurt you? Physically, sexually, emotionally? The question hung in the air while Shanice's mind raced through months of memories. Maxwell's gentle hands when she cried, his patience with the girls, the way he'd held her during thunderstorms when she couldn't sleep, but also the surveillance cameras, the blocked phone service, the way he'd looked at her pregnancy test like he'd won a prize. He never hit me, she said finally. That's not what I asked. Shanice closed her eyes. I don't know anymore. I don't know what was real and what was manipulation. An hour later, she sat across from Isabella in the same coffee shop where their worlds had collided. But this time, Isabella wasn't alone. A teenage girl sat beside her, tall, elegant, with Maxwell's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Shanice, meet Elena, Isabella said. My daughter, the one Maxwell told you is dead. Elena studied Shanice with unsettling intensity. You're prettier than the others, she said finally. I can see why Daddy chose you. Others? Sarah, Jennifer, Angela. I met them all when they came to visit me at school. Daddy brought them to Switzerland, introduced them as my new mothers. They all looked like Mom. Isabella's hand tightened on her daughter's arm. Elena has something to tell you. Something about Maxwell that the FBI doesn't know yet. Elena leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. My father didn't kill those women. Corey did, and he's been planning to kill you too. The revelation hit Shanice like ice water. What? I overheard phone calls. Corey gets paid twice, once to deliver women to my father, and again to eliminate them when Daddy gets bored. But this time was different. Ow! Elena's smile was cold as winter. This time, Daddy fell in love, and Corey wasn't supposed to let that happen. As Shanice stared at the bank records showing payments from Corey to Maxwell dating back 3 years, her phone rang. It was Elena, and she had news that would either save them all or destroy everything they'd fought to build. But the voice on the other end wasn't Elena's. It was Maxwell's, and his words made Shanice's blood freeze. They have Maya and Mia. If you want to see them alive again, you'll do exactly what I say. The enemy of my enemy might be my lover, but when 3 broken people unite against one monster, someone always gets burned. The abandoned warehouse where they met felt like neutral ground in a war zone, where former enemies gathered under flickering lights to plan their revenge against the man who destroyed them all. Maxwell sat across from Isabella and Elena, his usual commanding presence diminished by federal charges and the knowledge that his carefully constructed world was crumbling. Shanice stood apart from all of them, no longer sure who to trust. Corey has the girls, Maxwell said without preamble. He took them from the safe house 3 hours ago. Isabella's face went white. How is that possible? Child Services has been compromised. Corey's had people inside the system for years. It's how he's been able to cover up what happened to the other women. Elena pulled out her phone, showed them a message. He texted me 20 minutes ago. Pictures of Maya and Mia tied up in what looks like a shipping container. Shanice grabbed the phone, her heart stopping at the sight of her daughter's terrified faces. Where are they? Port of Savannah. But he's not keeping them there long. There's a cargo ship leaving for Mexico at midnight. Mexico. Shanice's voice cracked. Why Mexico? Maxwell's jaw tightened. Because I can't protect them there. And neither can the FBI. Once they cross that border, the girls disappear forever. When everything falls apart, do we discover who we really are? Can love survive deception, manipulation, and betrayal? Tell me what you think in the comments. Isabella leaned forward. What does Corey want? Money. $20 million transferred to an offshore account, plus guaranteed immunity from prosecution. And if you don't pay? Maxwell's hands clenched into fists. He sells Maya and Mia to the highest bidder. There are people who pay very well for American children with no one looking for them. The words hung in the air like poison. Shanice felt her knees give out, had to grab the nearest chair to stay upright. I'll pay, Maxwell said. Whatever he wants, I'll pay it. No, Shanice's voice was stronger than she felt. No more money. No more deals. No more treating my daughters like property. Then what do you suggest? Isabella asked. We take them back. Elena laughed bitterly. From a man who's been killing people for 3 years? A man who has connections in law enforcement, the courts, child services? How exactly do you plan to do that? Shanice looked around the room at the 3 people who'd been manipulated, betrayed, and broken by Corey Williams. Maxwell with his desperate need for family. Isabella with her stolen daughter. Elena with her fabricated memories of a dead mother. Because we know something Corey doesn't, Shanice said slowly. We know he's been playing all of us against each other. But now we're working together. Maxwell shook his head. It's too dangerous. If something goes wrong. Something already went wrong. Shanice's voice echoed off the warehouse walls. Something went wrong the day I let my desperation make me trust a man who saw me as merchandise. Something went wrong when I signed papers I didn't read because I was too scared to ask questions. She stood up, her decision crystallizing with each word. I'm done being a victim. I'm done being protected. I'm done letting other people decide what happens to my children. Isabella smiled for the first time since Shanice had met her. What do you need from us? Everything. Maxwell's money, Isabella's knowledge of Corey's methods, Elena's connections from boarding school. What connections? Maxwell asked. Elena's grin was sharp as broken glass. You'd be surprised how many international shipping families send their kids to Swiss boarding schools, and how much those kids hate their parents' businesses being disrupted. The abandoned warehouse felt like neutral ground in a war zone, where 3 survivors faced their tormentor under the harsh glare of industrial lights that revealed every ugly truth. As they finalized their plan to trap Corey, Maxwell's phone buzzed with a message that made his face go white. The twins were missing from their bedroom, and the ransom note was signed with Corey's signature, but he was supposed to be in federal custody. But the voice on the recording Elena played changed everything. It wasn't Corey giving orders to his contacts at the port. It was Agent Morrison. Looks like the FBI has been playing both sides, Elena said quietly. Good thing we didn't trust them either. Maxwell reached for Shanice's hand. Are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back to the legal system. We'll be on our own. Shanice squeezed his fingers, feeling the baby flutter inside her, as if responding to her determination. I've been on my own since the day I was born. The only difference now is I'm not alone anymore. As they walked out of the warehouse together, for people united by betrayal and bound by desperate love, none of them saw the figure watching from the shadows. Corey Williams stepped out of the darkness, his phone already dialing. They took the bait, he said into the device. All 4 of them, just like you predicted. Yes, sir. The warehouse at midnight. They'll all be there. His smile was cold as winter. No, sir. No witnesses this time. A mother's love and a billionaire's resources made for a deadly combination when the twins disappeared. And this time, there were no rules. Maya and Mia had been gone for 6 hours. 6 hours of pure hell that turned Shanice into someone she didn't recognize. The FBI wanted her to wait, follow protocol, trust the system, but the system had already failed her once. Maxwell stood in his office making calls that would have terrified federal agents. Numbers that didn't exist in any phone book, favors that came with blood prices, money that bought silence and information in Atlanta's darkest corners. I found them. Elena burst through the door, laptop in hand. Her face was flushed from running, but her eyes burned with the same fury that consumed them all. Corey's got a warehouse on the south side. Industrial district. No cameras, no neighbors. Shanice grabbed her jacket. Let's go. Wait. Maxwell caught her arm. This isn't some rescue mission. Corey's desperate now. Cornered animals do crazy things. Those are my babies. Shanice's voice cut through the air like broken glass. I don't care if he's got an army waiting. I'm getting my girls. The drive through Atlanta felt like moving through water. Every red light lasted forever. Every turn took them further from safety and deeper into a world where money mattered more than badges and favors were worth more than gold. Maxwell's phone buzzed constantly. Updates. Locations. confirmations that made his jaw tighten with each message. "He's not working alone," Maxwell said, eyes fixed on the road. "The people who helped him escape federal custody, they want something more than money." "What do they want?" Shanice asked, though part of her already knew. "You, the baby, a way to make this whole thing disappear." Elena leaned forward from the back seat. "They think if they eliminate the witnesses, the case falls apart. Corey walks free, and everyone gets paid." The warehouse district looked like the end of the world. Empty buildings with broken windows stared down at them like dead eyes. No streetlights, no signs of life, just shadows and the smell of rust and abandonment. Maxwell parked 3 blocks away. "We go in quiet. Elena takes the back entrance. I'll create a distraction from the front." "And me?" Shanice asked. "You stay in the car." "Like hell I do." The look that passed between them could have melted steel. 3 months ago, Maxwell would have ordered her to obey. Now he saw the fire in her eyes and recognized something that couldn't be controlled or contained. "Then we go together," he said simply. They moved through the darkness like ghosts. Shanice's heart hammered so loud she was sure it would give them away. Every step brought them closer to her daughters and further from any chance of backing down. The warehouse loomed ahead like a sleeping monster. Light leaked from windows high above, but the ground level remained dark, silent. Maxwell's hand found hers as they approached the side door. His touch should have been comforting, but instead it felt desperate. Like he was trying to memorize the feeling of her fingers in case this was the last time. "When we get in there," he whispered, "stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't try to be a hero." "I'm already a hero," Shanice whispered back. "I'm their mother." The door wasn't locked. It creaked open to reveal a corridor that stretched into blackness. Their footsteps echoed despite their efforts to stay quiet. Voices carried from somewhere deeper in the building. Adult voices mixed with something that made Shanice's blood turn to ice. Children crying. Not crying. Calling for their mama. Maxwell barely caught her arm before she could run toward the sound. "Wait," he breathed. "Listen." More voices. Male. Angry. And something else that made the hair on Shanice's neck stand up. Laughter. Someone was enjoying this. They crept forward until they reached a door marked with peeling paint. Through the crack, Shanice could see them. Maya and Mia sat in metal chairs, their hands tied with rope. But they weren't crying anymore. They were talking to each other in the twin language they'd developed as babies. Planning something, and standing guard over them was Corey. But he wasn't alone. 3 other men stood around the room like they owned it. One cleaned his fingernails with a knife. Another checked his phone constantly. The third just stared at the twins with eyes that made Shanice want to vomit. "Mama's coming soon," Corey was saying to the girls. "And when she gets here, we're all going to take a little trip together." Maya, brave little Maya, lifted her chin. "Our mama's not stupid. She won't come alone." Corey's laugh made Shanice's skin crawl. "Oh, baby girl. Your mama's been doing exactly what men tell her to do her whole life. She'll come alone if I tell her to." That's when Shanice heard footsteps behind them. Actually, Elena's voice rang out from the darkness. She brought friends. Have you ever watched someone you thought you knew transform into something completely different right before your eyes? Have you ever realized that the person you've been underestimating might be the most dangerous one in the room? The warehouse door creaked open to reveal Maya and Mia tied to chairs. But they weren't crying. They were smiling. Behind them, Corey held a gun, but his cocky grin faded when he saw who walked through the door wasn't FBI agents or police. It was Elena, and she was armed. Hell hath no fury like 3 people who've been played, and Corey Williams was about to learn that some games have deadly consequences. Elena stepped into the warehouse light, holding a gun like she'd been born with it. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by all black. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a ponytail that meant business. "Hello, Corey," she said, and her voice carried 10 years of rage. "Miss me?" Corey's own weapon shook in his hands. "Elena? But you're dead?" "Yeah, that's what Maxwell was supposed to believe. Thanks for helping with that, by the way." She kept walking forward, gun trained on his chest. "Did you really think I'd stay hidden forever?" The 3 men with Corey reached for their weapons. But Maxwell appeared from another entrance, and whatever they saw in his face made them freeze. "I wouldn't," Maxwell said quietly. See, the thing about having money is that you can buy very interesting friends. Friends who don't ask questions. Friends who clean up messes. Shanice moved toward her daughters, but Corey swung his gun toward her. Nobody moves. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Elena asked, still walking closer. You sell Maxwell a grieving widow and her kids, collect your money, and disappear? Leave him to deal with the emotional wreckage. It was business. Corey screamed. Just business. My daughters aren't business, Shanice said, and her voice carried a strength that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. My life isn't business. I'm not a product you can sell. Maya spoke up from her chair, her 8-year-old voice cutting through the tension. Mama, we're not scared. Mia figured out how to get loose. As if on cue, Mia's hands slipped free from the ropes. She'd been working on the knots the whole time, her small fingers more clever than any of the adults had realized. That's my smart girl, Shanice said, pride mixing with terror. Corey's gun swung wildly between targets. This is all wrong. Maxwell was supposed to keep you busy while I disappeared with the money. The pregnancy was just a bonus. More leverage. Leverage. Maxwell's voice dropped to something deadly. You're talking about my child. Your child. Corey laughed, but it sounded more like hysteria than humor. You think that baby's yours? I've been planning this for 3 years, Maxwell. 3 years of setting up the perfect mark. You want a family so bad, you'd pay anything for it. Elena had worked her way close enough now. The only problem with your plan, Corey, is that you forgot something important. What's that? You forgot that women talk to each other. Elena's gun pressed against Corey's temple just as Mia freed Maya's hands. The twins jumped from their chairs and ran to Shanice, who wrapped them in her arms like she'd never let them go. The men with Corey looked at Maxwell, looked at Elena, looked at the exit, and made the smart choice. They dropped their weapons and put their hands up. It's over, Corey, Maxwell said. Federal agents are surrounding this building. Your friends in Miami have been arrested. The money trail leads back to you, and now we have witnesses. You can't prove anything, Corey snarled, but his voice cracked. Actually, we can. Elena smiled. It wasn't pretty. See, while you were busy playing criminal mastermind, I was busy collecting evidence. Bank records, phone calls, video footage of you negotiating prices for human beings. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. 3 years, Shanice said, looking at the man she'd shared a bed with, made children with, trusted with her life. 3 years you spent planning to sell us. It wasn't personal, Corey said desperately. It was just money, just a way out. Everything about this was personal. Shanice held her daughters tighter. You sold your own family. The warehouse doors burst open as federal agents flooded in. Agent Morrison led the charge, his face grim with satisfaction. Corey Williams, you're under arrest for human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy. As they led Corey away in handcuffs, he looked back at Shanice one last time. You'll never be happy with him. You know what he is, what he's capable of. Shanice met his eyes without flinching. I know exactly what he is. The difference is, he chose to be better. Have you ever seen justice served with your own eyes? When someone who destroys lives for money finally faces consequences, does it feel like victory or just relief? As sirens wailed in the distance and Corey was finally led away in handcuffs, Shanice felt Maxwell's hand find hers. But when she looked up at his face, she saw something that made her heart race. Not the cold calculation that had once terrified her, but the warm relief of a man who'd almost lost everything that mattered. 6 months later, she had everything she'd ever wanted. So why did freedom feel like learning to walk all over again? The house Maxwell bought for them sat in a quiet Atlanta suburb, where children played in front yards and neighbors waved from their porches. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed money or power. Just a 2-story home with a white picket fence and enough bedrooms for a growing family. Shanice stood in the kitchen making breakfast while Maya and Mia argued over cereal choices at the table. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the kind of chaos that meant family instead of fear. Morning, beautiful, Maxwell said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. His hands settled on her growing belly, now 7 months round with their daughter. "Morning yourself." She leaned back against his chest, still amazed that she could do this freely. Choose his touch. Welcome his presence. Love him without fear. The therapy had helped them both. Dr. Martinez met with them twice a week, helping them navigate the difference between love and control, between protection and possession. Maxwell had to learn to ask instead of demand. Shanice had to learn to trust instead of survive. "Mama," Mia called from the table. "Can Maxwell come to my school play tomorrow?" Maxwell tensed behind her. Even after all this time, he still worried about overstepping boundaries, about being too much too fast. "What do you think?" Shanice asked, turning in his arms. "Want to watch our daughter debut as a singing tree?" "Our daughter," he repeated softly, like the words still surprised him. "She chose you too," Shanice reminded him. Both of them did. It was true. Somewhere between the warehouse rescue and settling into their new life, the twins had started calling Maxwell by his first name instead of Mr. Cross. Started including him in their bedtime stories and asking for his help with homework. Started treating him like what he'd become, their chosen father. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. "I'll get it," Maxwell said, but Shanice caught his arm. "We'll get it," she corrected. Together, they'd learned to face things together. No more secrets, no more making decisions for each other. Even something as simple as answering the door had become a partnership. Elena stood on their porch holding a casserole dish and wearing a smile that looked genuinely happy for the first time since Shanice had known her. "Brought dinner," Elena announced, pushing past them into the house. And news. She'd been staying in Atlanta since Corey's trial, rebuilding her own life and helping other women escape situations like theirs. The foundation they'd started together was small but growing, offering legal aid and safe housing for trafficking victims. "What news?" Shanice asked, settling into the living room chair that had become her favorite spot. "Corey's appeal was denied. He's staying in federal prison for the next 25 years. Elena's smile turned sharp. His lawyers tried to argue entrapment, but apparently video footage of him negotiating prices for human beings doesn't play well with appeals courts. Maxwell's hand found Shanice's, his fingers intertwining with hers. "It's really over then. The legal part is," Elena agreed. "The healing part takes longer." Maya and Mia bounded into the room, homework forgotten in favor of visiting with Elena. She'd become their honorary aunt, the woman who'd helped save them and stayed to watch them grow. "Elena, want to feel the baby kick?" Mia asked with 8-year-old enthusiasm. "She's been doing it all morning," Maya added. "Maxwell says she's going to be a soccer player." Elena knelt beside Shanice's chair and placed her hand on the growing belly. Right on cue, their daughter delivered a strong kick that made Elena laugh. "She's got attitude already," Elena said. "Takes after her mama." "Definitely," Maxwell agreed, and his voice carried pride instead of possession. That evening, after Elena left and the twins were in bed, Shanice and Maxwell sat on their back porch watching the sunset paint the Atlanta sky in shades of gold and pink. "Are you happy?" Maxwell asked, the question he'd been asking regularly since they'd moved into the house. "I'm free," Shanice answered, the same response she'd been giving. "There's a difference. But are you happy?" She considered the question seriously. Happy felt like a luxury she was still learning to afford. For so long, survival had been the goal. Safety had been the dream. Happiness felt almost greedy. "Ask me again when she's born," Shanice said, placing his hand over the spot where their daughter was currently practicing her gymnastics routine. "Deal," Maxwell agreed, and kissed her forehead with the tenderness of a man who'd learned the difference between taking and being given. "When was the last time you felt truly free to choose your own happiness? When the chaos finally settles, do we recognize peace when it finds us?" As they locked up the house together that night, Maxwell stopped suddenly at the front door. "There's something I want to ask you," he said, and for the first time in months, Shanice wasn't afraid of what came next. The woman at the door looked exactly like Shanice had 8 months ago, desperate, scared, and holding a contract with Maxwell's name on it. Her name was Carmen, and she had 3 children under the age of 6. Her husband had disappeared 2 weeks earlier, leaving her with eviction notices and medical bills that would take a lifetime to pay. The contract in her shaking hands promised salvation in exchange for 2 years of domestic service. "I'm sorry to bother you," Carmen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the man who gave me this said you'd understand. Said you'd help me figure out what to do." Shanice looked at the woman standing on her porch and saw herself 8 months ago. The same hollow eyes, the same desperate hope, the same willingness to trade anything for her children's safety. "Come in," Shanice said, stepping aside. "Maxwell, can you make some coffee?" Maxwell took one look at the contract in Carmen's hands, and his face went white. It was his letterhead, his signature, his offer of employment that was really something much darker. "I didn't write this," he said quickly. "Someone's using my name, my company. This isn't real." Carmen's face crumbled. "Then there's no job? No way to pay for my son's surgery?" "There's always a way," Shanice said, guiding Carmen to the couch. "But not this way. Never this way." Maya and Mia appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the sound of a stranger's voice. When they saw Carmen's tears, they crept down to listen. "What kind of surgery does your son need?" Maxwell asked, sitting across from Carmen with careful distance. "Heart defect. The doctors say he won't live to see his 7th birthday without it." Carmen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Insurance won't cover it. Says it's experimental." Maxwell's phone was already in his hand. "What hospital?" "Maxwell," Shanice said quietly. "What are you doing?" "The right thing." He looked at her with eyes that held no calculation, no hidden agenda. Just a man who'd learned what love really meant. For the right reasons. The phone call took 10 minutes. Maxwell spoke to doctors, administrators, and someone who apparently had the power to make medical miracles happen. When he hung up, Carmen was staring at him like he'd descended from heaven. "Your son's surgery is scheduled for next week. Everything's covered." "I can't pay you back," Carmen whispered. "I'm not asking you to." "But the contract." "There is no contract." Shanice took the fake document from Carmen's hands and tore it in half. "There's just people helping people because it's the right thing to do." Carmen broke down completely then, her whole body shaking with relief and disbelief. Maya and Mia came down the rest of the stairs and sat on either side of her, offering the kind of comfort that only children know how to give. "Why?" Carmen asked when she could speak again. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Because someone helped us once," Shanice said. "And because your children deserve the same chance mine got." They spent the next hour connecting Carmen with legal aid, social services, and a job training program that would help her build a stable future. When she finally left, she had more than hope. She had a plan. "That felt good," Maxwell said after Carmen's car disappeared down the street. "It felt right," Shanice corrected. "Is there a difference?" "Sometimes." She moved into his arms, her belly making the embrace awkward, but no less meaningful. Good can be selfish. Right is something else entirely. Maxwell's hands settled on her lower back, supporting the weight of their growing daughter. "I love you, Shanice Williams." "I love you too, Maxwell Cross." They'd never said it before. Not in all the months of therapy and healing and learning to trust. But standing in their living room, having just helped a stranger avoid the trap they'd both escaped, the words felt inevitable. Natural. True. "There's still something I want to ask you," Maxwell said, echoing his word from the night before. "Ask away." He dropped to one knee right there in their living room, pulling a simple diamond ring from his pocket. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing that screamed wealth or power. Just a promise made visible. "Marry me," he said. "Not because of contracts or obligations or fear. Marry me because we choose each other. We've been bought and sold and traded like property. What does it mean when someone asks you to choose them freely?" As Shanice looked down at the man kneeling before her, the man who'd learned to love without controlling, to give without taking, she felt their daughter kick hard against her ribs, as if even the baby approved of this moment. She'd started this journey as property being traded between men. She ended it as a woman who rewrote the rules entirely. Isabella Rose Cross entered the world on a Tuesday morning in March, screaming loud enough to wake half of Atlanta. She had Maxwell's dark hair and Shanice's stubborn chin. And from the moment she opened her eyes, it was clear she would be taking orders from no one. "She's perfect," Maxwell whispered, holding his daughter with the careful reverence of a man who'd never thought he'd get this chance again. "She's loud," Maya observed from her perch beside the hospital bed. "She's strong," Mia added approvingly. "She's ours," Shanice said, and the possessive pride in her voice was nothing like the desperation that had once driven her. This was the fierce joy of a woman who'd chosen her family freely. The hospital room glowed with morning light streaming through windows that looked out over the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere in that maze of buildings was the mansion where Shanice had first learned what it meant to be seen as more than property. Somewhere out, there was the warehouse where they'd almost lost everything. Somewhere was the courthouse where Corey would spend the next 2 decades paying for his crimes. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the weight of her daughter in her arms and the feeling of Maxwell's hand warm against her shoulder. "Mrs. Cross." A nurse appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. "Sorry to interrupt, but there are some reporters downstairs asking about the foundation. Something about an award." Shanice and Maxwell exchanged glances. The Williams Cross Foundation for Trafficking Survivors had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. What started as a way to help women like Carmen had become a network spanning 3 states, offering everything from legal aid to job training to safe housing. "Tell them we'll hold a press conference next week," Maxwell said. "Today is family time." The nurse nodded and disappeared, leaving them alone with their perfect, ordinary miracle. Elena arrived an hour later carrying flowers and wearing the biggest smile Shanice had ever seen on her face. "How's our newest freedom fighter?" Elena asked, peering down at Isabella's sleeping face. "Exhausted from making her grand entrance," Shanice replied, "but ready to take on the world. Takes after her mama." It was true. In the years since Corey's arrest, Shanice had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. She'd testified before Congress about trafficking legislation. She'd spoken at conferences about economic coercion. She'd helped dozens of women escape situations that mirrored her own. But mostly, she'd learned to live without fear. "There's something else," Elena said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "This came to the foundation office yesterday." Shanice recognized the handwriting immediately. Prison stationery. Corey's desperate scrawl across the front. "I don't want to read it," Shanice said without hesitation. "Good," Maxwell said firmly. "You don't have to." Elena held up a lighter. "Want to do the honors?" They burned the letter right there in the hospital room, watching Corey's words turn to ash in the metal wastebasket. The smoke alarm never went off, but if it had, none of them would have cared. "That felt good," Shanice said as the last corner of paper crumbled away. "That felt final," Maxwell corrected. 2 weeks later, they stood in their backyard, surrounded by friends and family, for Isabella's blessing ceremony. It wasn't a christening exactly, and it wasn't a naming ceremony, but something uniquely theirs, a celebration of choice and freedom and the family they'd built from the ruins of manipulation and control. Maya and Mia took turns holding their baby sister while the guests mingled around tables laden with Elena's cooking. Carmen was there with her 3 children, her son healthy and laughing after his successful surgery. Dr. Martinez was there with her husband, beaming with professional pride at how far her patients had come. As the sun set over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Maxwell found Shanice sitting under the oak tree they'd planted when they first moved into the house. "Happy?" he asked, settling beside her with Isabella sleeping against his chest. For the first time, Shanice didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'm happy." "Good," Maxwell said, kissing her forehead. "Because this is just the beginning." He was right. In the distance, sirens wailed towards some emergency they couldn't see. Somewhere in the city, other women were But here, in their backyard, under their tree, holding their freely chosen family, Shanice finally understood what Elena had meant about revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's building something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to break you. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believe in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts? Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey hit you hardest. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along.